Well, we need to deconstruct that. We need to go in and make sure that people, first of all, we need to get the categories off the census. We need to get the categories off of our, and run against the idea of disparate impact. We use the doctrine of disparate impact throughout the federal government. Obviously, disparate impact come in after the creation of identity politics, because you need the categories first, and then say, well, the fact that such and such a law or regulation has a disparate impact that is racial means that it is racist and we need to get rid of it. But the categories themselves are the problem. For example, let's take African American. If you hive off Nigerian Americans or Ghanaian Americans, they do very, 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 very well. I think Nigerian Americans have a college graduation rate of 75%, which is very higher, much higher than even white Americans, but definitely higher than the average American. One thing they do have is intact families, and we don't have very good data, but what data we do have demonstrates that Nigerian Americans and Ghanaian Americans, and to some extent as well West Indian Americans, have families that are much more intact. And then when you say, like I just said this in a classroom that I taught at a major university, somebody came back to me and said, well, that is the reason why African Americans who are not Nigerian, Ghanaian, is because they're suffering from the legacy of slavery. But that is not the case either, because in the 1940s and the 1950s, African Americans had a better rate of family intactness than whites. And they were much closer to slavery. So something must have gone wrong that we need to address if we do want to get rid of the disparities. We need to address this issue through policy and through society. But the idea...
Let me stop you there. You've hinted in your books about what you think the problem is in that regard with African Americans in the U.S. to the extent, there is an issue socially.
Well, what
are the statistics say?
It's a growing issue with quote unquote.
It's not just African Americans.
Yeah, with Hispanic Americans, quote unquote, is with everybody.
Yeah,
it's a colorblind killer.
Yeah,
it's not. But they say no. It's really a color thing. But it's not because of color. It's because of if you have bad family intactness, you're just not gonna succeed. People who have followed this issue. There's something called the success sequence, and if you follow this sequence, if you graduate, get a job, then marry, and then have children, you have a 97% chance of escaping poverty. But you cannot alter any one of these things. You can't change them around. You can't say, well, I'm going to just have children before I graduate, get a job, and get married. No, then your chances of poverty increase, and your chances of dysfunction increase. So my point is, these categories are bad. They're not good for us. They don't give us good policy. And so we need to get rid of the categories. They're created by leftists with a leftist purpose in mind. They're not created to improve the lives of anybody. They're created to transform society. As soon as we understand this, what I think a conservative president should do is make sure they're gone from the 2030 census. And let's do whatever job we need to do to get rid of also of the idea that disparate impact should lead us to policy. Get rid of the discipline of disparate impact.